All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, then I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. I feel like I'm hearing something weird in my ears. Oh, wait. Anyway, I want you to remember, folks, this show does not run on freedom fumes alone. So if you're watching me on Rumble, smash that green $ during the show to drop a Rumble rant. It's kind of like tossing me a cold one right to my way at 7:41 in the morning. When it comes to politics, you know we tend to need a cold one. Anyway, it keeps the mics on and the vibes high. And if you want to go all in, please click that subscribe button for just $5 a month because your support helps me fight the good fight. And by the way, let me just add, we are getting ever so close on YouTube to making the next metric in order to get monetized there. I am about just under 150 hours shy. So if you just want to binge watch, some of my episodes, I've got episodes for everyone. So go back, check them out, do some binge watching, call up your significant other and say, hey, do you want a Liberty Dad pod and chill, right? Like, do that for me. Help me get to that next level. Anyway, today, what are we talking about? Well, before I get into it, let me do some splaining. So, I was absent. I like to stay up front with my audience and let you guys know what's going on. So, where was I the last 2 days? What the heck happened? Well, I don't know if I might have said this before on the show, but sitting for me can be very problematic. It causes me a lot of back and neck issues. I've been steadily trying to work them out. I'm not going to go through all the details. Just suffice it to say this. If you ask, have you tried this? Have you looked into this? The answer is probably yes. Like right now, I'm not even sitting. Technically, I'm kind of like I have this kneeling chair that I use, which works out a lot better when I'm on the show. Sitting is just very problematic for me. And my other desk where I work, it's actually a standing desk. So I actually spend most of my time either standing, walking, moving about. When I was in high school, I ended up doing a lot of getting out of my seat. I think at that time, I don't think I recognized that I was having some sort of issue, but I think it's a mechanical issue of some sort. And, now that I'm 47, the mechanical issue is really like, hey, address me now. And you're like, I must address it. So anyway, so that's what I've been up to. So there's that. My son was also out the last 2 days for Veterans Day. And I'm just easily thrown off when the schedule changes. And here's the thing. If you've watched the show for any length, if you've been around for a while, you know that early on, when he was first born, and then the months after that, it was extremely difficult to manage the podcast, because it was like I would joke and say every 2 weeks, it seemed like he was just switching up his sleep schedule, for which I had to adapt. Well, now he's got a more consistent sleep schedule, or at least he did. So for a while, I would wake him up at about 6:30 so that he could get ready for school. And now he likes to go to the gym in the morning with his mama. And so he wakes up sometimes at like 5:30 or 6, which is my time to work. Like I get up at like 5 o'clock and I get downstairs, start making breakfast, get his lunch ready for school and stuff like that. And while I'm doing all that in the kitchen, I've got my laptop there working on preparing for the show. That's my time to focus. And so then he comes down, and, so it just really throws me off my game. And so it's been very difficult. Just the last couple of weeks, I've found it very challenging that he's got this new schedule that I'm trying to adapt to. And I'm like, man, I don't want to get up any earlier. Like that just would seem crazy. So anyway, I got those. And then, we've just got a lot going on in the house. The dog, she's moping around. She's not even moping around the house. She's depressed right now because we had her spayed, and then we've got the cone of shame on her so that she won't bother the wound while she's healing. And that just happened yesterday. And she got home and she was cool at first, and now she's like, she doesn't want to have anything to do with anything. She just lays there like a rug. And I'm just like, come on, honey, let's go. And then she's like, no. She just looks at me all sad and pathetic, and then I feel bad, and I'm like, look, we got to do what we got to do around here. So anyway, we just got a lot going on in the Liberty Dad household. So if you bear with me, folks, we'll get past it. Again, I don't like to make excuses. At the end of the day, I want to deliver a show 7:30 Monday through Friday, but bear with me as I try to work out some of the things that I didn't really need to work out much of my life, because I would just go to work and just suffer. And now I'm at home, so it's a little bit easier. Since I work from home, it's a little easier for me to just be like, oh my God, I'm just, killing me and whatever. Anyway, we're working it all out. So there's that. One more thing that I've got to mention. I've got to mention this. Friday, before the show, my son came in, and he was like before the show, like I wasn't even streaming. And he came in, he's like, Dad, he's whispering. He's like standing right here, and he's whispering to me. And he's like, Dad. He's like, tell everybody about my shoes. I was like, what? He's like, tell everybody that you washed my shoes. So I forgot, and I didn't think much of it until he came home Friday, and he was like, Dad, did you tell everybody you washed my shoes? And I was like, no, I forgot, buddy. I'm sorry. So I am telling you that his shoes were particularly dirty, and they needed to be washed. And so there I washed him. So now I'm doing what my boss told me to do. So there we are. Let's see. Last night I was on Are You Smarter Than a Politician, hosted by Free. Go check that out. I'll drop the link in the show notes. Go check that out. It was a lot of fun. Basically, it's like a game show where they invite participants on and they ask them just like this question after question after question after question. You answer it, and then you get points based on how the audience feels about your answer. I did not win, but I came in second place, so that's good. So, like if you want to think of it in terms of a politician, they say the first time you run to get your name out there. The second time you run to win. So, like, you can think of it like, hey, I went on the show the first time just to kind of get my foothold, kind of get, a feeling for the game. So if I go on there again, I'm going to go on there to win. So we'll see. So, maybe next time I'll win, maybe I won't, who knows? So check that out. And then, let's see, today, before we get in the show, I got a couple things. Number one, I want you to let me know what let me back up. Going around right now in the libertarian circles, there's this like 3.5 hour video that's allegedly a takedown of Dave Smith and this pragmatic libertarian approach. Basically, the anarchists are at it again. Okay. And they're a feisty bunch. And they're just insisting. They're like, Dave's got to respond to this. And they're so angry. And they're like, oh, we've totally demolished him. Now, I put out a post and because somebody was like, hey, DL, you made an appearance. And then I was like, me? What did I do? I didn't have nothing to do with that. Like, I like Dave and I support Dave and I disagree with him from time to time. But I was like, I didn't think I had any reason to be in somebody else's video, although I'm honored if somebody ever does that. So then I was like, well, maybe I'll try to watch it. And while I was working in the yard last week before it got bitter cold this week, I tried to find it on Spotify, and apparently it's only on YouTube. And I was like, well, I can't do that because just my phone. I don't pay for YouTube so that I can listen to it while the screen is off. So I was like, whatever. Then later, somebody posted a timestamp, and I thought, okay, well, if this is the timestamp where my show gets a mention or whatever, then maybe I'll go check it out and see. So I went and I listened to like about 5-minute segment, and I found multiple things wrong. So I posted about it, and I was like, all right, that's the end of that. But it's still going around. People are talking about it. And to be honest with you, when I look at the views on YouTube, the views for this 3.5 hour video are pretty phenomenal. Like, they got a lot of views. I was like, I didn't know you guys had that kind of an audience, but so they do have a fairly sizable audience. So I'm asking you as my audience, would you like me to watch the video or listen to it and then give some sort of response? Now, I know you might say, well, I don't know what's in it. The video is basically heavily critical of Dave, saying that Dave Smith does not hold to libertarian principles in the way that he should, and they walk through it. And my understanding is, based on posts from people that support the video, it's using Dave, so it's not really so much about Dave as it is about this approach. So it kind of encompasses, like, it uses Dave as, like, I think somebody called it a test case, right? Dave is kind of like the stand-in, the fill-in, because he's prominent with this approach. And so they're having a big conniption over it. So if you guys want me to, like, watch this video and then talk about it, I'm not going to, now look, I'm not going to do point by point, because that would end up being like, what, I don't know, a 9-hour video, the way I talk? No, not going to do that. That's insane. That one's off the table. So whatever I can fit within about an hour, I'd be willing to do. If you, the audience, would like me to review it and then respond. Now, would I be agreeing or disagreeing? Well, I don't know, because I've only watched like 5 minutes. But I did find some things that I disagreed with in 5 minutes. So let me guys know if you want me to do something along that line, and then I will. And to answer your question, my VA lady says, "Hey, is Liberty Dad monetized on YouTube yet?" No, and I said that at the beginning of the show. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to pick a fight. I promise. I'm just pointing out that I did mention it already. So, because I know you stand on my neck and you're like, hey, I was trying to be ahead of the game today. Trying to be a little ahead of the game. So, but no, we're about 150 hours away. So again, like I said earlier, grab your significant other, YouTube and chill. Liberty Dad and chill. So, all right. But anyway, so yeah, let me know if you guys want me to take that on. I'll take it on. If that's what the audience wants, that's what I'll do. I don't mind. I mean, I do, but don't. Like, I don't want to do 3.5 hours. Anyway, now let's get into today's show. We're going to talk about property taxes because I've been telling you guys I'm going to address this. And when I went and first looked at what's going on, I started noticing that there were multiple bills. I was like, oh man, there's multiple bills. What the hell's going on? And because initially I thought there was just one bill, and no, there's multiple. And so as I'm doing my research, I came across a video of a guy named, what's his name? Let me see if I can bring back his name. What's his name? Grant Warrington. I think he's an investor here in Florida. I'm not too familiar with him. I literally found him while I was doing research, and he has two roughly 13-minute videos that explain this, I think, very well. And I really liked it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of get into video, reaction video mode, which is pretty common anyway. So I'm going to play most of his, I've got it in 4 different clips. I'm going to play most of his video. And then I'm going to kind of add my own 2 cents along the way. And what I want to do is I want to play it for a couple of reasons. One, I think he does a great job of explaining these bills. So why reinvent the wheel? I can just play his video, add some commentary, and you will hopefully be all the wiser for it. Also give him a little bit of, his channel's bigger than mine, so I don't know what I'd be adding to him, but, give him a little bit more exposure for his hard work. The link to his full show is in the show notes. You can check that out. But what I want to know is, while we're playing this, let me know if my bill reviews, if you would like to see them done more like what you see here. Now, he does a lot of his video where he's out walking around with the camera in front of him. I'm not going to do that. Obviously, I do my show live, and that wouldn't work. But if you want a video that's more succinct and right to the point, rather than necessarily pulling up the bills, going in depth, let me know. Because, we want to try to improve the show. And if there's something that would make the bill reviews more interesting to you, or whatever, let me know. So I'm going to play these 4 clips. And the 4 clips, I broke them up into 4 clips where one is kind of like an introduction. He kind of introduces what he's going to talk about, kind of his concerns. And so he kind of lays the foundation. The second clip will be him going through the House bills, the Florida State House bills. And then the second one is he does the Florida Senate bills. He walks through those and kind of gives you just, a brief summary of each one and why he has a problem with them. And then he wraps it up and tells you what he thinks is going on with so many bills. So that's what we've got going on today. We're going to play that. So let's go on over to Dad TV and make sure everything's set up correctly here. All right. So almost set up. How about that? There I am. So we've got me on Dad TV. So again, as we're watching these, if this is the kind of format that you would prefer, let me know. I am still working on my scoring system. Mostly I'm working on the technical part of it to make it a little bit less boring. But let me know your thoughts in the chat. And for right now, let's listen.
Florida politicians just dropped 13 new bills to end property taxes in Florida. Sounds great, right? But none of them does what Governor Ron DeSantis asked for and what every Florida voter actually deserves. In this video, I'll show you all 13 of these so-called property tax cuts in plain English, expose why Republican politicians are turning their backs on DeSantis, and reveal the real reason Florida politicians don't actually want to end property taxes.
So I think this is very interesting here. He has already kind of made a distinction between 2 groups. He's like, you've got DeSantis and then you've got Florida Republicans. And it's kind of like, and you could probably think of this, he's not saying it, but I'll say it. You can probably think of this as still that rift between the DeSantis camp and the Trump camp. That's probably what we have really going on here, right? Because Trump is, and we're seeing that in the more national level. We've got a rift between MAGA and what people might be saying, or fake MAGA, if you will. And so there's argument right now that's happening. It's on social media. It's in, it's in our politics. right now, and I think that's kind of what he's alluding to, even if he doesn't specifically say this. And I think this is interesting because at the end of the day, at some point, Trump will be out of office. Where does the Republican Party go? Like, what do they do? And so I think right now you're seeing this internal fight. You know, it's great finally to see some other party have an internal fight. However, their fight seems to be a bit more of substance than what you see from the Libertarian Party, who argues for less meaningful things. They're kind of arguing, they're saying, like, which direction should MAGA go? Now, I want to be careful. I don't want to say all these bills are necessarily because of Trump. They're not necessarily because of MAGA. I'm just saying the MAGA, the Trump wing of the Republican Party, I believe, are the ones that are kind of driving this. And so even though it may not be at the behest of Trump, it may still fall in line with some of the attitudes and the perspectives from that camp. That's what I'm saying. So let's continue.
Let's jump in. Here's what Governor DeSantis is saying.
This is going to be on the ballot in November of 2026. So it's over a year away. We're working very hard with folks. You got to get the language right. You got to get the numbers. You got to get all that. I've said, Florida resident, you have a home, you're homesteaded, you should own it. You shouldn't be taxed. That shouldn't be an ATM for the local government. Like, that's the vision that we want to see.
Okay. That's a great vision, actually. I'm going to give kudos to DeSantis for pointing out that local communities should not be we've had this argument here in Jacksonville, right, where the local government is basically taxing the hell out of us. We had the gas tax a couple of years ago here in Jacksonville. They have this like some $1 billion series of projects that they want to improve Jacksonville. And in order to have the money for that, what they did was they extended the existing 6-cent gas tax for another 10 years. And then they added an additional 6-cent gas tax for 30 years. So there's this overlap of 10 years where you have 12-cent addition on the gas tax. And that was, so they just keep taxing. And then, of course, you've got school board and not school board, but the schools that are being funded and then whatever other taxes that they've got going on, which, by the way, the Libertarian Party of Duval County has spoken out against on many occasions. We've literally went to City Hall and said, hey, stop taxing people. Stop supporting these. And we have exactly one person who is consistently voting no. Rory Diamond. He's been on the show before. I don't always agree with him. He is a Republican. We have our differences. However, where I can agree with him is that he is consistently talking about, hey, stop spending. So that's, I just think that's an important point to make, is that we really need to focus on our local government and saying, hey, stop spending money, doge yourselves, which we've got doge kind of going on in Florida. And by the way, I just want to point out, if you go to this guy's, I had to make a choice. So he had 2 different videos talking about this issue. This video that we're watching is the newer one. I actually watched them both. The older one was actually kind of interesting because he talks a little bit more about Doge and how Doge helped uncover some of the wasteful spending at the local level and how that plays a role in this in these bills. But I wanted the newer one just because I wanted to make sure that we had the most up-to-date conversation about these bills. So anyway, all that being said, let's get back to the video.
It makes sense, right? If the government can take your house just because you don't pay property taxes, then you never really own it. You're basically renting it from the government for life. And here in Florida, home values have gone through the roof the last 5 years, which means property taxes have too. So now you got retirees, young families, and people on fixed incomes either losing their homes or barely hanging on. DeSantis wants to fix that. He wants real relief by ending these insane property taxes. And you'd think every politician would be on board, right?
Okay, no, I would not, actually. And that's the problem. Too many people, they believe that the politicians, just because they put out a bill, and he's going to address this here in a little bit, but they believe, oh, this person put out a bill, they must care about this issue. But I talked about it in my bill review last week, I believe it was, where Randy Fine down in District 6, Congressman Randy Fine, he's got bills that I said, these are performative because they're not constitutional. They're likely not to get out of committee, let alone get to the floor of Congress for an actual vote. And they're not likely to pass. And if they did pass, they're not likely to stand constitutional muster. And I believe he knows this. But he's putting out these bills anyways because why? It gets him in a position to say, I tried to do this. So we have to separate what they're trying to do versus the actual real effort that they put into it. And we should say, no, you didn't really try. You put a half-ass effort into it so you could say that you did. And this is why I do the show. This is why I talk about these issues, because I want to make sure that my audience is as informed as possible. And when you're more informed, guess what? You are in a better position to hold our elected representatives accountable.
I mean, this guy won his last election in a landslide, paid off half the state's debt, built a $15 billion surplus, and flipped Florida from a swing state to deep red. Back in 2018, Democrats had 400,000 more registered voters. Today, Republicans lead by around 1.4 million. That's massive. But instead of backing him up, Florida politicians went the other way. They introduced 13 new bills that sound like property tax reform, but every single one of them is set up to fail. And here's where it gets sneaky. They know most people are only going to read the headlines. So when you see 13 bills to end property taxes, you think, finally. But once you actually look inside these bills, you realize they don't end anything. They just move numbers around, rename a few things, and call it reform.
I mean, that's a lot of legislation. It really is. And that's, again, that's why I do the bill reviews, because I want you to see what's in the bill. I want you to see that, hey, just as an average person, you can read these bills and gain a lot of understanding. And then when you do it enough, eventually you start seeing patterns. And I know that with a lot of the conversation on social media, like they talk about patterns and, there's anti-Semitism and all this other stuff. I mean like patterns in like, well, I probably shouldn't have mentioned that because it was totally irrelevant. It was a thought that popped in my head. But you start to see patterns in how things play out. You see patterns of, hey, there's awful lot of legislation that gets put forward and doesn't make it out of committee, that doesn't end up passing, whatever. And so what was the point of that? Why rather than having 1,000 bills where maybe, and I'm just making up numbers, where maybe 10 of them end up becoming legislation, why not have 100 bills, just again for a number, that are good and quality and actually make it to the floor to be debated and discussed and voted on? Even if they don't all make it, that's fine. Like, not every bill that you draft should necessarily become law, but it should be the case that most of the bills that are drafted actually end up getting debated and discussed. Therefore, the only way to do that would be to have fewer bills, which means they have to be higher quality bills. And the only way that we're going to get to that point is if we, the American people, are informed and stand on their necks. That's how we get there. Let's continue.
It's the oldest political trick in the book. They count on you not to read the fine print. Now, here's how this little game really works. Only a member of the Florida House or Senate can introduce a property tax proposal. To change the Florida Constitution, it has to be filed as what's called a joint resolution. That resolution needs a 3/5 majority in both chambers, and then it goes on the ballot in November 2026.
How many of you, be honest, how many of you knew that? I'm not going to lie, I was not aware that it specifically had to be a joint resolution bill. Now, I've talked about it in the past. There are different types of bills in Congress, right? And a joint resolution is one of them. And they all serve different purposes. And this is a key to understand, because when we're talking about a bill and we say, oh, this is a joint resolution bill, then we know This bill is one that that the citizens of Florida get to vote on. But if it's a House bill, if it's a Senate bill, then it's one that our representatives get to vote on. And that's a big distinction. And he kind of goes, I think one of the bills is actually not a joint resolution.
After that, it still needs 60% of voters to say yes. Not 51%, 60. So the setup, they know it's almost impossible to get 60% of people to agree on anything, especially when they flood the ballot with 13 different versions. So I'm gonna break down all 13 of these proposals and give you my no BS take on every one of them. And when we're done, I'll show you the secret trick hiding in all of them and how this whole thing is just one giant scam.
All right, so it's one giant scam. I like how he phrased it. He's like, I'm going to show you the secret trick. Kind of reminded me of like, here's that one trick that politicians don't want you to know. It is kind of true. Like it's that one trick that politicians don't want you to know. But that's what we're doing here on the show. We are spreading the word so that you will know, so that you can hold your representatives accountable. So let's dive into the second video. We're going to go back to Dad TV here. And so this is going to be the House bills. So he's going through all of the House bills, and then we'll go into the third video, which again are the Senate bills. Then we'll wrap it up for his conclusion, you know, that top secret, that one secret that politicians don't want you to know. So let's go ahead and check out video 2.
Let's start with the House. They're the ones who dropped the first 8 bills, and here's the crazy part. Every single one of them looks like tax relief, but hides the same problem. Watch this. First up, we got HJR 201, which means House Joint Resolution 201. This one eliminates all non-school property taxes on your primary home starting January 1st, 2027, if voters approve it. Sounds awesome, right? Finally, some relief. But here's the catch. You'd still pay the school portion of property taxes, and that's the part that keeps going up. I've been paying school property taxes for 27 years. I don't have kids, and under this bill, I'd be paying for schools for the rest of my life.
That isn't fair. And I look, people can make all the arguments they want. At the end of the day, taxation is theft. Okay? And the reason I say that, very simple. We can break it down in like 2 minutes. If you have 3 people that are voting on a tax, and one of them says they vote no, well, the other 2, they win, right? Because there's more of them. That's how it works. And so then all 3 of them get taxed, whereas only 2 of them actually agreed to it. The third one did not. And so therefore, the money is taken against their will. That's how a tax works. That's how all the taxes work. So that's why it's always theft. Now, some people might make the argument and say, well, it's extortion, and you could dive deeper into that. But at the end of the day, theft, extortion, it's kind of a distinction without difference in a sense, because it's taking money from somebody against their will, which neither one is better than the other. Both of them are bad. So I like, for me, I just kind of stick with theft because I think it makes it super simple, right? And, again, there's an argument to be made that it's extortion, and a lot of that is because, well, we're not going to get it. But point being, taxation is theft. He is paying for a service that he's not even benefiting from for 27 years and then however many years as he gets older. He's paying for it. I have a child. My child is in school. I should pay for that. It's not his job to pay for my child, yet he does. And look, I'll be honest. If there was an option on the ballot today that said any person that is not a parent or any person that does not have children going to a public school, do they get to be relieved of school taxes? I would vote yes. I would vote that they would be relieved from having to pay school taxes. Now, there'd be less money available, but that's a different problem. That's an expenditure. Like, how do we spend the money? How do we, what do we spend it on? So on and so forth. That's a different problem. And we can talk about that problem separately. But it's absolutely a problem that this man has been paying taxes, for a service that he's not getting. And here's the catch. Property taxes, a large portion of that money goes to schools. So it's not like it's a fraction of the property tax. A large portion of the property taxes that he's paying go to pay for a service that he doesn't get to use. And it's important to make that point, because a lot of people, when they argue about the roads, right, the infamous roads, what do they say? They go, well, how do you get to the store? You drive a road, so you benefit from it. They're talking about a very direct benefit. Okay, fine. If that's the measure of taxes being acceptable, then by your own measure, school taxes are unacceptable for people that don't have children, or for people whose children do not go to school for one reason or another. Maybe they're homeschooled, maybe they go to a private school, maybe they're grown and they no longer go to school, whatever, right? But like by their own measure, they're saying people that are not directly benefiting from a school tax should not be taxed. That's their own argument. Let's continue.
Fair? I don't think so. Then comes HJR 203. This one phases out non-school property taxes on homesteads over 10 years by adding a $100,000 exemption every year until 2037. Yeah, 2037. So you're waiting a whole decade before you feel anything. And again, school taxes still there. Now
Okay, let's add a little bit more to that. You're waiting a whole decade. Man, there's a lot that happens in a decade with government and taxes and spending. A lot happens. So by the time we actually got to that point, it could be the case very easily that things have changed elsewhere that effectively nullify whatever benefit you would be expecting to get. That's unacceptable. If we're going to get tax relief, it needs to be on the horizon in the foreseeable future, like next year. Right? This is fun. We should see it. Our checkbook should see it by the next year. I mean, I understand they might say, okay, this bill doesn't go into effect until, January 1st or the next fiscal year. Fine. That's fine. I'm willing to wait, but not any longer than that. And I want to see a tangible, very clear benefit. I want my wallet to tell me, like, hey, DL, I'm noticing a benefit here. Because if my wallet can't tell me that, then did it really happen?
HJR 205, this one sounds good at first. It gives people 65 and older a break from all non-school property taxes starting in 2027. Great for retirees, sure, but there are 5 million Floridians over 65 and 18 million under 65. So for most people, no help at all.
Worse than that, this is picking winners and losers. That's what it is. It's saying if you're 65, you get to be the winner of this tax break, just based on your age. Nothing at all to do with the property itself or anything related to what the tax money might be going to. I mean, if we're going to at least pick and choose and say this person gets relief but not this person, it should be in some way related at least to the property or at least to where that money's going. So, for instance, if we say, hey, we're going to give people that don't have children in public schools relief from paying, public schools, pay from their taxes going toward public schools, that would at least be somewhat fair, because it would at least be saying, hey, the people that are directly, very clearly benefiting from it, they're the ones that have to pay. The ones who are not don't have to pay. Or if there was something related to the property, which we'll talk about toward the end here.
You starting to see a pattern yet? Every one of these bills leaves school taxes untouched. That's the hill they won't give up. HJR 207 replaces the $50,000 homestead exemption with 25% off your home's value. But again, only for the non-school part. So if your home's worth $400,000, you save $100,000 from being taxed. But if your home's only worth $200,000, it barely changes a thing. It helps the people with pricier homes, not the ones getting crushed by rising taxes.
Okay, so again, picking winners and losers. And this one's not very different than the 65 and older, because the truth of the matter is when you look up the data, you will find that older people have more wealth. I mean, it makes sense. If you're 65, this is not to say that every 65-year-old is wealthy. This is just saying, as a group, people that are older have more wealth because they have just simply lived longer to accumulate it. And if they've made any savings, if they've made any investments, well, those investments over time they've had time to grow. If you're 25, unless you have struck it rich through some, maybe you've made a business that got really hot, right? Or maybe you got into a particular line of work that is really high paying. Maybe I don't know how old you are to work on Wall Street, but let's say that you work on Wall Street and you're making millions of dollars as a 25-year-old. Again, I'm just making an assumption. Then that's fine. But most 25-year-olds, they don't have any significant level of wealth because at best, they've been an adult for 7 years. And that's assuming they didn't go to college or do any other thing that would have limited the amount of time that they would have been able to utilize to accrue and build their wealth. Whereas when you're 65, the likelihood that you have built wealth over time is far higher. Again, not everybody. So this is the government picking winners and losers. And it's picking the people that have already had time to grow their wealth. And so, like you said, the $400,000 home, it's great that they get a reduction. It's great that it benefits them, and it should, but it also should benefit the person who has a $200,000 home or just the person who rents. Because again, well, they're not, the person that rents isn't going to have to necessarily pay the property tax, but the person that owns the house will pay the property tax. And how does that play out? That plays out in the rental, the cost of rent. If I own a house and I have to pay property tax on it, I'm not just going to suck it up and just pay the tax. I'm going to roll that into the cost of rent, which means even the renter is to some degree going to contribute to that property tax, even though they don't own it and the property tax is not directly going to them. Because at the end of the day, this is why tariffs are bad. This is why, the cost rolls down to the consumer, the end consumer.
We got HJR 209. This one gives you an extra $100,000 tax break if you keep your home insured. But let's be real, if people are already struggling to pay property taxes, they can't afford insurance either. This one helps the people who need it least. Next,
So that's 3 bills. 3 bills. Right now, there's one for the age 65 and older, one for based on the cost of your home, and then one based on insurance. And they're all basically picking winners and losers, saying, all right, we're going to help out. It presents as if it's helping out people. However, in practice, the people that it helps out are the people that have that are in a better position in the first place. Now, again, I'm not opposed to helping them. I am not one of those people that say, oh, you're wealthy, you can afford it. What I'm saying is, okay, if we're going to give relief to people and we only give it to the people that have more wealth or likely to have more wealth, then we are basically saying tax cuts for the wealthy, for the rich. That's not good. It should be tax cuts for everyone. And we should recognize that the people who have the least amount of wealth are the people that need the tax relief the most.
HJR 211, this one removes a 50% cap on portability. That's how much of your property tax savings you can take when you move. Normally, you can only move half. This bill lets you move all of it. So if your old home was worth $1 million and you saved $200,000, you can move that full $200,000 to your new home. Sounds nice until you realize it doesn't lower anybody's taxes. It just helps people who are moving from one home to the next, usually expensive ones. If you're already struggling to keep your house, this does nothing for you.
Okay, so now we're at 4 bills out of 13. 4 bills out of 13 that are basically going to help the wealthy. And again, not beating up on the wealthy. I'm cool with you being wealthy. I want to be wealthy, right? And I hope, all of you in the audience are working your way towards wealth. I just want to make sure that we're being as fair as possible when we're getting rid of taxes. Ideally, we would get rid of all of them. In my perfect world, in my utopia. We're not anywhere close to utopia. So I'm going to take what I can get, but I am going to make sure that we're being as fair as possible.
Comes HJR 213. This one slows how fast your home value can rise for tax purposes. Instead of 3% per year, it's 3% total over 3 years for homesteads and 15% for other properties. But again, none of it touches school taxes. You still end up paying more, just slower. Another looks good on paper idea that does nothing to stop the bleeding.
the other thing that this one does is I think this is confusing to people. Like, not that people can't understand it, right? People are smart out there. But I think when we get into these kind of bills where it's like, all right, this much money and then this percentage over this amount of time, it's just more effort to try to figure out what are my friggin' taxes, or more. There's one thing that the rich and the poor have in common. But there's probably more than one thing, but there's one thing for sure in this conversation. And that is they want to try to keep as much money as they can from taxes. They make money, they want to keep as much of it as they possibly can. That's consistent. And we know this because we don't hear stories about how people are so generous and they said, man, I made so much money this year, I'm just going to go and willfully give it to taxes, to the government. And there's a website where you can do that. Nobody really talks about it much because nobody wants to do that. Okay? And so when you're trying to figure out what is the best way for me to pay less taxes, these kind of things, I think, complicate it and they make it more difficult. It's great if you're wealthy, you can just hire somebody to go figure it out for you, and then they will tell you if you want to save some money, if you want to lower your tax bill, here are the things that you can do. Here are the opportunities that are available to you. It's much harder if you're not making a whole lot more money. So in a sense, again, we have yet another bill that is, if it is beneficial, it's going to be beneficial to the wealthy. These bills don't help out the middle class. They don't help out the poor. And so when Republicans talk about, hey, we want to make smaller government, we want to help out the poor, we'll tell them, you know what? If that's what you want to do, if that's what you're saying, how come we don't see that in the bills that you present? That's a fair question to ask of them.
Finally, HB 215. That's House Bill 215. And this one says local governments need a 2/3 vote instead of a simple majority to raise tax rates. It also lets newly married couples combine their Save Our Homes benefits when they buy a house. Sounds like a win, right? Nope. First, you got to be married to even get the biggest savings, which leaves a lot of people out. And second, local governments love raising millage rates. They'll have no problem hitting that 2/3 vote. This doesn't stop anything. So yeah, these are 8 failed bills. Not one of them ends property taxes, not even close.
All right. Not a single one ends property taxes. 8 bills. 8 of them. And what did I count? 5? 5 which we could easily point to and say they favor the wealthy if they do anything at all. That's not relief. That's not help. We should look up every one of those bills. And we should find the author, whoever it is that introduced it, maybe even the co-sponsors, right? Who sponsored the bill? Who's co-sponsoring the bill? Because those are the people that put their name on it first. So we're not even at a point where we're voting on it. We're just hearing, because the sponsor of the bill, the co-sponsors of the bill, that's basically like a vote. Not quite. I mean, they could vote no against it, but I don't think they generally do, right? They could just say, hey, I want to sponsor this bill, bring it up so that we can have a debate on it, and then, discuss it and see where it goes. And so it could be earnest and more neutral, that they just want it to, they want to bring it to the table and have a conversation. But we can look at it and say, you supported that bill, right? Because we can look at bills like this and we could say, it's not even worth our time. We just watched this clip. Where are we? We're at 8:26, right? We're basically an hour into the stream, and we've seen 8 bills, and we figured out within an hour that these bills are junk. So we could point to the sponsors and the co-sponsors and say, no, you need to be held accountable for even suggesting that this was a good bill. If I, DL, Liberty Dad, can in less than an hour figure out that these 8 bills are no good, so can every sponsor and co-sponsor, and they should be held accountable for even bringing them to the table. These are not bills that should have been brought to the table. They should have rejected them and said, no, this isn't going to deliver what we need. That's what they should have done, but they didn't. Now, let's go on. Let's go back to Dad TV here, and let's talk about the Senate bills. Maybe they did better, right? Well, let's see.
Now let's see if the Florida Senate did any better, because after those 8 disastrous in the House, you'd hope somebody's got their act together, right? They don't, and you're about to see why. First up, SJR 270 or Senate Resolution 270. This one says if you're 65 or older, you've lived in your Florida home at least 5 years, and you and your spouse make under $350,000 a year, you could stop paying most of your property taxes, except the part that goes to schools. Sounds great, right? But think about it. I'd have to wait another 15 years just to maybe qualify for this. And even then, I'd still be paying the school portion, which is one of the biggest parts of the bill anyway. So no, this doesn't end property taxes, and worse, it punishes people who work hard or built successful businesses. If you make over $350K, you're out. Next, SJ.
Yeah. So that one actually has a line of conditions. I don't like them. Any bill like that that says, all right, we're going to reduce your tax bill if you meet condition A, condition B, condition C, the more conditions that they add, the worse that bill really is. We're talking about property. So why don't the conditions be about property? Period. End of story. And this is the simpler, the better. Or you could say, hey, where's this tax money going? Again, I go back to the issue of schools. If you're 65, regardless of whether you make $350,000 or less or more, the amount of money that your income should not matter at all. It should not matter at all. Your age really shouldn't matter. But if we're going to go with this, it shouldn't matter. Because guess what? If you're 65, the likelihood is almost all but guaranteed that you do not have children in school. And you haven't had children in school for quite a while. Like, I'm 47. Okay, I'm almost 50 years old. Let's say that at the age of 50, I have another child. Now, that's very unlikely, but let's just say that I did, right? And he's going to go to school. He or she will go to school for 18 years, all right? That's going to be a rare situation, very rare situation. Most people my age have children. If they have children that are in school, they have either middle school students or high school students. In other words, they're almost, quote unquote, aged out, if you will. So, no, this bill's junk, and it has too many conditions. It's the same problem that we have with the last one. All right, so now he's on this next one.
AR 274. This one's like a loyalty card for homeowners. Stay in your home for 20 years, and the county can't raise your home's tax value anymore. Stick around for 30 years, and they'll knock 50% off your home's taxable value. Sounds like a deal, right? But here's the problem. The median age of a first-time homebuyer is 38. That means you'd be 58 before the first tax break and 68 before you get the full one. People need help now, not when they're about to retire. And most people move every 13 years anyway. So guess what? You'll never see a dime of that relief. Then comes...
See, this is why it's important to know the facts. Did you know that the average, that people move on average 13 years? Like every 13 years? I didn't know that. But that's a good question to ask. And these are the kind of things that we have to ask when we're reading these kind of bills. Oh, in 20 years, you get this kind of relief? All right. How many people will that actually impact? And at what level? It could be, if we got down into the data, that we find out that wealthier people, and I'm just making stuff up, we could find out that wealthier people move less frequently and less wealthy people move more frequently, right? And if that's the case, again, I'm making stuff up just to make an example. If we found that, then we would recognize that this bill would, under those circumstances, be basically assisting the rich more so than the poor. But even then, you have to wait 20 years. 20 years is a long time. Things could change in 20. The bill could pass, and by 20 years' time, you could have other legislation that effectively nullifies it, or they could repeal the bill. So imagine that bill is on the ballot, next year. And the Floridians, let's say they not only meet the 60% threshold, let's say they meet the 80% threshold, right? 80% of Floridians say, that's a good bill. We want that bill. And then in 15 years, we have new people in Florida, new circumstances, new legislation, and maybe there's something that repeals that on the ballot. And then the voters say, yeah, let's repeal that given the circumstances that we have now. Well, that would mean all the people that voted for it, the 80%, are SOL. right? Do you see how this works? So yes, when we're looking for things, next year at best, next fiscal year at most. Otherwise, no. The answer should be no. I don't care how good it sounds. I can't trust government. I can't trust society, the situation, to be the same by that time in order to get that benefit. Legislation should not look like some sort of investment. That's just absolutely ridiculous. It's one thing to say, I'm going to invest my money here, and I'm going to anticipate that if I'm 47 now, I invest my money, and by the time I'm 65, here's going to be my nest egg. That's fine. But we should not be making investments in legislation, because way too many things can happen that are way out of our control. And so therefore, the investment that we made ends up being a flop. Unacceptable. This is ridiculous. Like, we need to, look, I'm going to be nice about it, but we need to start kicking people out of office that present these kind of bills. And the only way that we can do that, the only way that we can hold them accountable, is if we understand the nature of the legislation and the problems associated with it.
SJR 278. This one's about what happens when someone buys a new home. Normally when you buy, property tax is uncapped and the county reassesses the value, which often means a massive jump in your tax bill. This bill tries to limit that. If the home's worth under $500,000, they can't raise the taxable value by more than 150% of last year's value. Sounds nice, but only if you're buying a cheaper home. Anything above $500,000 doesn't count. And with the median home price in Florida sitting around $404,000, that leaves out a big chunk of buyers. Plus, it still doesn't lower your taxes. It just stops them from skyrocketing too fast. All right, now SJR.
Okay. So again, this one goes back to one of my complaints with this one is, like, you have to, again, this helps out more wealthy people, right? Or, people that have more means, because you have to try to be able to figure out, what house can I buy? How and under what circumstances will this apply to me? We should not be, I know, I'm not trying to say that citizens are dumb, although the way some of you guys vote, just saying. But let's put it this way. We should not be having to do math to try to figure out, like all kind of complicated math, to try to figure out, can I get in on this tax break? That's not helping our property taxes. Property tax should be simple, right? It should be absolutely, and any break from property tax should be simple, very clear. The person that graduated high school that probably shouldn't have graduated high school should be able to understand it. Very simple. Because the more simple it is, the more likely, A, that it'll work, and then B, we'll recognize when it doesn't work. When it starts getting complicated, in order to argue with government and say, hey, you passed this, or we passed this, this legislation, and then it's not working, then you've got to fight them over all the metrics to say, this is why it didn't work. If you don't believe me, go and argue about the money that's being spent in education. Some people will say, we just need to give more money for education. And you go, yeah, but here's this chart that shows how much being spent. And they'll go, yeah, but. And then there's this big argument over the metrics. Simplify it. Every bill should be simplified, especially when it comes to taxes, so that the argument is easy. Either it worked or it didn't work. End of story.
Our 282, this one's aimed at small businesses. It limits how much the county can raise their property values each year, either 3% or whatever the consumer price index says, whichever's smaller. Cool for businesses, sure, but what about regular homeowners? Nothing. It doesn't touch your taxes, your assessment, or your skyrocketing bill. So if you're just trying to keep your house, this bill's completely useless. And finally, SB 286. This one's not even a
Oh, I skipped. I was busy watching. Yeah, again, so when you're talking about small businesses, again, we're picking winners and losers. I just, I think I've already made my argument for picking winners and losers. I don't have much to say about that one.
Constitutional amendment, which means you don't get to vote on it. Only the politicians do. It says if you add something to your home, like a new room above your garage, kitchen, or pool, as long as the total value is under $100,000, the county can't raise your property value for tax purposes. And honestly, that's great, but it's not property tax reform. It's just a tiny fix for a much bigger problem. And by the way, why are homeowners being punished at all for fixing up their own property? You're improving the neighborhood, adding value, and you get hit with a higher tax bill for it. It's insane. None of these Senate bills eliminate property taxes either. Not one. They just add more rules, more exceptions, and more confusion.
All right. More rules, more exception, more confusion. What is that? We'll sum it up. It's more bureaucracy. It's more government. I thought Republicans were small government. None of that sounded like small government to me. That sounded like complicated government. Hey, let's make it more difficult for you to figure out. Don't you people think I have enough to do? You people, meaning like people in, the state house, in government and elected positions. You guys don't think I have enough to do already that you're going to add all these complicated issues or things that I have to try to figure out so that I can see how can I best manage my money and effectively pay the least amount of taxes? I mean, we built it into the system that you can do certain things to reduce your tax bill. But why should I have to do all of that? Why should I have to do any of that work? I already work. I work hard for my money. You work hard for your money. And when you work hard 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, maybe 60 hours a week, and then you come home, you pay your taxes, and then tax season rolls around, and then you got to spend hours and hours and hours, depending on, what level of wealth you have, the number of properties, and all these other things. You might have to spend hours and hours and hours or spend tons of money to pay somebody to figure it out for you. Why should you have to do all of that so the government can have money that they did nothing for? So they're just going to pass more regulation, which increases the hardship on you just so you can have less money. Make it make sense. Why should I have to do all this work so that I can have less money? That's insane. I go to work and I work hard to have more money, not less. So no, we should reject every one of these bills. We should reject every sponsor, every co-sponsor, every single one of them. They should be getting nasty emails, nasty phone calls. I mean, not too nasty. Don't make threats. But we should be pretty rude with them and say, the hell is this? It's garbage. All right. Now let's get to the point where he talks about the nature of all 13 bills. Why have 13 bills in the first place? Because that kind of, like he said, he points out, if these are going to be on the ballot for voters, why have 13? Is there any good reason for that? That seems like a lot, because I want you to think about it. 13 bills, and then you've got to try to, not only do you have to figure out, first and foremost, whether you support all 13, because you have to figure out, okay, how are these applied? Who do they apply to? What's the impact? And ultimately, at the end of the day, your answer is going to be, how does this affect me? But that's a fair way to look at it. When I go to the ballot, I look at it and I say, how does this affect me? Probably you do too. And so I'm going to have to do that 13 times when they could have just presented one. Well, let's see what he has to say about that.
Now let's see if the Florida Senate did any better.
Hold on.
Remember when I said it takes 60% of voters to pass a joint resolution to change the Florida Constitution? 60%. That's a supermajority, and the more options you give people, the harder it gets to hit that number. Let me show you how it works. Picture 100 people in a room, and I ask, who likes vanilla ice cream? It's easy, right? Just about everybody raises their hands, and boom, vanilla wins. Now I throw in 5 more flavors: chocolate, strawberry, cookie dough, mint chocolate chip, Rocky Road. Suddenly, people are split. Some vote chocolate, others vote strawberry. A few go for cookie dough. Now, no single flavor hits 60% and nobody wins. That's exactly what Florida politicians are doing with these 13 bills.
Okay, so let's make a little correction. I think he's mostly accurate. This is a good analogy, but I do believe that it's not going to be the situation where if all 13 bills were on the ballot for voters to vote on, I don't believe that it's going to be, would you support, which one of these do you support, and you only get to select one. But I do believe, so I think he's a little bit inaccurate there. It could be, and that would make it even much worse, and then he'd be dead on. But even if it's the case where voters could vote for all 13 of them and potentially pass all 13 of them, the likelihood is very low because most voters are going to go and they're going to approach it kind of similar to his ice cream. They're going to be like, which one do I prefer? Which one do I think is the better one? So a lot of voters will go there and they'll say, well, I like this bill. Maybe they're going to say, I'm 65 years old, or I'm going to be 65 years old, and I make less than $350,000. I like that one. I don't like the rest of them. So they may vote no on the rest and vote yes on the one that they like, thinking of it in terms of one but not the others, even though technically you might actually have the option to vote for all 13 of them and have all 13 of them pan out. The likelihood is that it'll be treated as if it's one versus all of the rest. So whether it's specifically one of the rest or whether it's all of them, the likelihood is it's going to be treated as one over all of the others. And so therefore, in that sense, he's absolutely correct. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it's presented. The likelihood is that none of them will get 60%. And that's a fairly high threshold. And when none of them get 60%, guess what all the politicians get to do? Well, let's hear what he has to say.
They're splitting the vote on purpose. They want it to look like they're helping you when really they're protecting the system that keeps the money flowing. Because here's the truth. They don't want property taxes gone. That's their piggy bank. Property taxes fund bloated budgets, pet projects, and nonprofits nobody's watching. It lets politicians look like they're doing something positive for the community when really they're not fixing anything.
Oh, it allows them to grandstand, to get out there and say, I did something. I submitted this many bills. When I did my bill review for Randy Fine, he was boasting that in his first 100 days, he had 8 bills that he submitted. And I was like, okay, well, like 4 of them I failed, okay, for whatever reason. And many other people might say, well, I sponsored this bill. And then that allows them to defer, and say, well, I did do something. And so the voters will go like, oh, wow, this guy, he tried really hard, but it was the rest of everybody else. But the rest of everybody else doesn't get held accountable, nor does that particular elected representative. Because in many cases, as we can see here, these look like the way that it's being done, it looks like it's being done on purpose with the knowledge they're not going to pass. So you get to benefit from being able to say you did something knowing that it was likely not to pass. This is my criticism of Randy Fine's bill from was it last week? I think it was last week. His dual citizenship bill. I said, I don't think it's constitutional. I don't think it's going to make it out of committee. But guess what? Most people don't know that. Most people aren't going to be like, well, you should have known that, Mr. Fine. And so they won't hold him accountable for putting together a trash bill. He'll just get to be able to benefit and say, well, I tried to do something and it wasn't my fault. I did what I could. But we should stop allowing them to use that excuse. We should hold our representatives accountable. We should start digging into these bills. We should start watching videos like me when I do the bill review, or people like, what was his name? Garrett, I think is his name. Let me look here. His name is, where did it go? Grant, not Garrett. So we should do that with Grant. We should watch his videos when they break them down and go, oh, that's good information. And then we should immediately get on the phone with our elected representatives and ask him, what the hell are you doing? Let's listen to the rest of what he has to say.
They're just managing the illusion. And when it fails, which they know it will, they're going to go on TV and say, hey, we tried. The voters just didn't support it. It's a setup, it's slick, and it's designed to make you think you're the reason change didn't happen. Because they're going to blame you. See, it's easy for politicians to say, let me explain why we have to keep doing things the same way. But it takes guts to say, let's tear this down and rebuild it the right way. That's what Governor DeSantis is trying to do. So don't fall for the explainers, vote for the trailblazers. And here's the real reason Florida politicians don't want this to pass. It could cost them their next election. If they kill property taxes, they'll piss off the mayors, commissioners, and school boards who live off that money and back them at election time. Those local officials are the ones who endorse them, rally votes, and keep them in power. So instead of one real fix, they dropped 13 fake ones to make it look like they're working. They're splitting the vote on purpose so nothing changes. And when it fails, they'll blame you. So here's what you do. Call your state rep and tell them you want one simple question on the ballot in 2026. not 13 distractions. This is what you want it to say. Do you want to eliminate homestead property taxes? Yes or no? That's it. I'll drop a link in the description so you can find your state rep. This isn't about politics, it's about ownership and breaking free from a system that taxes you to death. Because if the government can take your house over a tax bill, you never really own it. They've had decades to fix this. They won't. So now it's up to us to back Governor DeSantis' plan to end property taxes for good. We're not the only ones sick of this. People all over Florida are waking up and finally pushing back. And if we keep the pressure on, we're going to win. But first, you need to see what they've already done with your money. Click here to learn how these Florida politicians blew $1.2 billion in property taxes. They got caught red-handed, and they'll do anything to keep the gravy train rolling. Click.
All right. So go check out his video. He's got a lot of videos out there. I think he does some good work. Now, I get it. I'm a libertarian, and you guys might be like, well, you're promoting somebody that's supporting Ron DeSantis. Look, he's in office. It doesn't matter. He's there, right? And if he's looking to do something that I can get on board with, then yes, I will support him in that instance. And when he's doing something that I disagree with, for which has happened many times, I will oppose him. And I will say, nope, absolutely not. Unacceptable. You should be fired. And I'll use the same aggressive language as I always do. That's how I operate. That's how you should operate. Now, when it comes to election time, then we can look at, different candidates. We can look and say, oh, this libertarian challenger here, we want them in office, or a Democrat, or whatever, right? We can have that. But right now, Ron DeSantis is in office. And if he is looking to actually bring real relief, I'm on board. And it sounds like he is. Now, let's address this homestead exemption, because there's some argument out there. People will say, well, it only applies to a home that you homestead, which is, the home that you live in, not other properties. I will take any relief I can get, because right now we have zero relief. Something is better than nothing. Would I like there to be no property taxes on any property? Absolutely. But the first thing that I have to get, the first thing that I would like to do, if it's required of me to make a choice, I'm going to start with the home that people live in. If there is a property that I absolutely want to prioritize that you cannot lose over taxes, it's the one you come home to, the one that your family's in, or maybe it's just you and your dog. Fine. I'll start with that one. Any day, all day, every day. Because where you live, if you're making your payments to the bank, you've taken a loan, you're making your payments, and you're being, quote unquote, good citizen, right? You're going to work, you're making your dollars, you're coming home, you're being wise with how you spend your money so you can pay your bills. You should not have your stuff taken because the government's like, yeah, we didn't really do anything but make a bunch of fluff bills, and we made all these bills. We made it confusing. We made it more difficult for you. We've ruined the economy. We've inflated the dollar, right? We've done all these things to make life harder for you. Oh, and by the way, since you couldn't pay your bill, we're taking your stuff from you. We're taking the home that you literally sleep in every night from you. No, I'll start there, and that's fine. And then we can deal with the additional properties after that. I will kick the can down the road. And I know people don't want to hear that. I want it all now. You can't have it all. Hell, we can't even get a proper bill at this point. So at this point, the small start is to get a proper bill and say, do you want, how we phrase it, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but, should we exempt homestead properties from taxes? Should we eliminate the property tax for homestead properties? And the answer is yes. Yes, we should. 100%. Now, what's interesting about that is right now you've got Mom Donnie, who won up in New York, and a lot of people are foreseeing, calamity in the future. I don't necessarily know that there's going to be calamity per se. What I think is New York is in bad shape, And so anything he does that even remotely looks positive is just going to be seen as a good thing. And then it will increase the demand for more of whatever it is. Like that tends to be the nature of things. That's how we got such a bloated government in the first place, because people were like, oh, we just need more legislation. We just need a little bit more power. We just need more taxes. We just need more, rather than somebody saying, yeah, no, actually, we've given you more and you can't seem to make it work. So perhaps you need less and you need to go back to the drawing table and figure out how to work with less before we give you more, right? But that's not what's been happening. So I actually foresee where he's not going to ruin New York right away. I think it's just going to make it harder. And a lot of those people are going to say, it's too hard here. Let's move somewhere else. And so if we actually removed property tax, I think that would incentivize a lot of people to come here. And with the weather this week, it's probably not helping our case. Just don't bring your crappy laws down here, right? Your crappy policies. They clearly didn't work up there. They're not going to work here. But that could actually be a good thing if we do it right. You know, if we start looking at things from the proper perspective of, hey, you have the right to retain everything that you own, or for the conservatives and the Republicans out there, most or as much as possible. If we start looking at it that way and just start dialing back, we will actually have a better society, because people will keep more of what they have. When they keep more, they'll be able to do more with it. They'll be able to buy more groceries, make better investments, buy that new car, whatever, right? Those are all objectively good things. And so I support this, even though we have that looming question of what about non-homesteaded properties. I also support it because while I don't support the 50-year mortgage that Trump keeps talking about, if you add in a reduction, so think about it this way. You add in the reduction in property taxes, or elimination, right? Hopefully elimination of property taxes on homesteaded properties. Then you have things going the way they are in places like New York and Portland and Seattle and California, the whole state of California, basically, or at least most of it. You have those. People are going to want to move here, and they're going to bring their businesses. They're going to bring their families, right? This could be a good thing, so long as we're mindful of the policies that we implement. And if we start getting in a habit of reducing things, reducing our tax load, and forcing government to work with less, that is objectively a good thing for our communities. And there'll be more people. And look, there's still an uphill battle. There are many things that have to that would need to be implemented in order for us to have or head toward the best society possible. But this is a good start. Objectively, a good start. And so when you have, like, say, the 50-year mortgages, people are going to be more than likely to see, hey, Florida has reduced it on homesteaded properties. I can go there, get a 50-year mortgage on a property that doesn't have property tax. And what does that do? That kind of counteracts the whole purpose of the 50-year mortgage, because it allows somebody to pay less even overall. Because overall includes your property tax. When you don't have taxes that you have to pay for, that's more money that you can put toward the actual principal of your property. That's a good thing. Now, I don't agree with the 50-year mortgage. It's not really going to be the conversation today, but I'm just saying it helps offset it here in Florida. And if we can show the rest of the United States how this works better, then we can start having more conversations about maybe property taxes, maybe other taxes aren't such a good thing. That's a conversation I would love to spread. I would love to see other states look at Florida and go, wow, the 50-year mortgage was a dumb idea. You know, you can argue whether it's not. I think it's a dumb idea. I don't think it's the right answer. It's a dumb idea, but look what happened with eliminating property taxes. People didn't need to spend 50 years paying their mortgage. They were able to pay it off sooner. And so then once they paid it off, they literally had a house free and clear that they actually owned, that they didn't have to worry about a hardship causing them to lose it. Then other states will be like, maybe we should implement that idea. And then if that happens, and I know I'm speaking a little bit kind of like utopian-like, But I don't think this is that far off. I think this is kind of on the horizon. We could kind of see this happening. We could see it playing out. Then we can start having other conversations and say, well, now that we've eliminated the property tax and look how well that benefited things, let's have a talk about, property taxes for non-homesteaded houses. Let's talk about this tax over here, that tax over there. Let's just talk about eliminating taxes. Perhaps that we don't need nearly as much government because right now, nearly as much government isn't benefiting us in the first place. Whatever government that you could argue we do need must be smaller, right? Like it needs to be smaller, not only in scope and size, but also in the amount of taxes that they take. If you're going to tax me for what you absolutely need, nothing more. No pet projects, none of that stuff that he mentioned, none of that. What you actually need. Learn to live on less. And I could go into it. I've talked about it before. We have documentation of schools that had far less money and produced far better results, even in their time. I've talked about it in the past. M Street School operated for like 80 years. It was a minority. It was almost entirely, or maybe it was entirely, minority school. Operated for like 80 years. They were far behind in terms of funding than their white counterparts. And yet they were able to deliver quality student after quality student. And we're not talking about they passed tests per se, although that too. They actually demonstrated that they were able to actually go out into the world and achieve good things. If we're going to have taxes, if we're going to have public schools, that should be the vision. And we should accept nothing less. Now, ideally, the government wouldn't be involved in any of it. I don't foresee that happening. So my message to my fellow Americans is demand the best from your government. The best. And demand that they operate on the least with the fewest regulations and control over your life. That's what the founders envisioned. This crap that we have now, it's not at all what they envisioned. All right, let's go check out some of the comments here and see what you guys are saying. Where's my music? That's not what, oh, yeah, I went to the wrong one. There we go. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So on the show last night, on Free's show, again, it's a game show where they basically ask you a bunch of questions and then the audience decides whether or not they like your answers. And there was a young guy in there. He was 18 years old. So that Liberty lady says, talk about the kid that won the game show last night and how encouraging it is to have somebody so young in the Liberty movement and how we might not have had answers like that when we were that age. So he was 18 years old and he was answering questions that I would not have been able to answer in that way when I was 18. And, maybe I wouldn't have been entirely stupid, but I would not have been able to answer the way that he did. So that was very encouraging, and I'm glad he won. He deserved it. Totally deserved it. I didn't agree with every single answer that he gave. That's fine. There's room for him to grow, right? Like I wouldn't have agreed with much of anything that I said when I was 18. So I'm okay with him being 18 years old and giving the answers that he did. And most of them were definitely in line with more freedom, more liberty. So it was great. Let's see. Keith said, missed the game show. My misunderstanding. That's okay, because you can go back and watch it later. So I encourage you to do that. Yep. It looks like that Liberty lady put the link in the chat. So go check that out. Yes, that Liberty lady says 50-year mortgages and 15-year car loans. You will own nothing and be happy. But will you? Will you be happy? You'll own nothing, but maybe you won't be so happy. Who is it that said that again? It was the World Economic Forum, or somebody from the World Economic Forum, right? So if you want to own things and be happy, the path that I'm telling you about is that path. That's the one that gets you there. And that path requires to be informed and hold your representatives accountable and tell them, no, I don't want 13 bills when you can do it in one. That's garbage, unacceptable. And if that's what you're going to deliver, We will primary you. We will vote you out. We will vote in the other party. We will do whatever it takes to get you out and to let the next person coming in know, do better or else. All right. I think that's all for the comments today, guys. And that's my show. Hope you found it informative and inspiring. By the way, nobody said whether you want me to do bill reviews more like what that man did. So I don't know. Let me know. Maybe you need time to think about it. Come back later. Throw a comment in there. That's fine. But let me know. Did you like that? Because I mean, how long has it been here? Where are we on time? We're at 1 hour and 27 minutes, and we literally went through 13 bills. Mostly Garrett did. I just kind of added some additional commentary. But if you want me to do bills more like him, or if you want me just to keep where I'm diving in and, digging into the details, I'll just keep doing that too. Whatever's the case, that's fine. But anyway, I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Whether you're watching live or you come back later, drop me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if I missed something. Maybe there's some more clarity that needs to be added, or maybe you just want to say, great job. Whatever the case, that's great. I appreciate it. But with that, I'm out. Have a good one. You know that I'm all about supporting organizations that hold my values. Make sure you head on over to blackgunsmatter.shop. They've got apparel, stickers, and more. Use the code LibertyDad, all one word, at checkout to score a 10% discount. Or just hit the referral link in the show notes. That'll make it so much easier. Remember, I'm not just a voice on a mic. I'm a dad who's working hard to deliver to you the best libertarian content. Connect with me on Linktree, where you'll find links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, because every bit helps keep this show rolling. Plus, you can find me on my other platforms to stay in the loop. With your help, this show, The Message of Liberty, will be seen and heard by more people. As always, I appreciate you tuning in and look forward to seeing you in the next episode.